Today, we're unpacking a truly incredible and honestly heartbreaking story based on recent case files and interviews. We're going to retrace the exact steps investigators took and show how modern forensic technology finally pierced through decades of total darkness to find a killer who is literally hiding in plain sight. You know, an investigator on this case recently said something that really stuck with me. They said, "I used to think if you met a murderer, you'd know they were a murderer, but criminals that get away with a crime for 40 plus years, they're able to hide the fact that they are this monster." We almost always think of monsters as these obvious threats lurking in the shadows, right? But as you'll see today, the perpetrator in this case was a completely normal, respected member of society. It took an absolute leap in modern science to finally unmask him. Section 1. The Girl Who Vanished. A November morning in 1983. Meet Sherry Jo Elliott. She was just 16 years old. Her mom, Joyce, described her as incredibly disciplined, very shy, and super cautious. As a kid, she loved to color for hours, and as a teenager, she was so careful she wouldn't even walk up to a stranger's car to give directions. She never left the house without her outfit perfectly matching and every single hair in place. Now, understanding her character is absolutely crucial here. See, the police initially brushed off her disappearance as just a teenage runaway, but her family, they knew instantly that was completely impossible for a girl this cautious. The timeline of that morning is just chilling. It was a really cold day. At 6:45 a.m., Sherry left her home in Flint, Michigan, for a short 2-block walk to her school bus. And she never made it. Her normal daily routine was to come home, eat homemade yogurt, do her nails, and watch The Young and the Restless. So by noon, it was painfully clear she was missing. What followed was days of agonizing searching, her family handing out flyers, checking dumpsters, looking everywhere. Tragically, on November 20th, 1983, a local trapper checking his lines found Sherry's body in a watery ditch in Saginaw County. She had been brutally assaulted and shot. Section 2. Decades of Dead Ends. The Limits of 1980s Police Work. Think about how wildly different investigations were back then compared to now. In 1983, Flint was a booming General Motors manufacturing town. A horrific crime like this sent absolute shockwaves through the community, and it generated thousands of tips. But here's the problem. 1980s police work relied heavily on human memory. Eyewitnesses reporting things like maybe a yellow Camaro or a white van. Detectives literally had to manually comb through spreadsheets of thousands of vehicles, burning through resources on completely unreliable tips. Today, we have modern DNA providing direct, irrefutable genetic evidence. But back then, they were essentially searching for a needle in a haystack, completely in the dark. To put their effort into perspective, think about this number, 123. That's how many direct DNA samples detectives actually took from potential suspects over the decades. They were doing one-to-one comparisons, testing suspects against the limited evidence they had, just praying for a direct match. They interviewed hundreds of people, and out of those 123 samples, 0 matches. Absolutely nothing. For the family, it was just an agonizing string of dead ends. At one point, someone falsely claimed they saw Sherry get into a yellow Camaro, which wasted months of police time. There were vague whispers of a white van, but honestly, the most heartbreaking dead end was the focus on Sherry's loving stepfather, Robert Schultz. Because he was the last person to see her, police aggressively targeted him. They even had Sherry's mother make secretly recorded phone calls to him. The poor guy lived under a cloud of suspicion for years, and even when the DNA profile was finally uploaded to the National CODIS database in 2002, it yielded absolutely no match. The case just went ice cold. Section 3. The DNA Breakthrough. Othram and the Race Against Time. Fast forward to February 2025. The Michigan State Police team up with a specialized lab called Othram, and they sent over a single, absolutely vital piece of evidence: semen DNA found on a sanitary napkin Sherry Jo was wearing the day she was taken. This evidence was over 40 years old, highly degraded, and mixed with bacteria. It was a long shot, but time was completely of the essence here. Sherry's father was battling dementia, and her stepfather had already passed away in January 2025 without ever knowing the truth. The detectives knew they were literally racing the clock to give the surviving family some answers. To get past how degraded this evidence was, Othram used a groundbreaking process called forensic-grade genome sequencing. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, unlike older DNA testing that needed a direct match in a criminal database, this process translates physical DNA into a massive profile of hundreds of thousands of genetic markers, which are known as SNPs. This allows the scientists to determine a person's biogeographical ancestry and, most importantly, map out the suspect's distant relatives. It's like a giant genetic puzzle. So this broke down into a really meticulous four-step workflow. Step 1, extract the degraded DNA from that old 1983 evidence. Step 2, sequence those hundreds of thousands of markers to build a robust profile. Step 3, discover distant relatives by comparing that profile against commercial genetic databases. And finally, Step 4, execute a genetic genealogy search, basically building a family tree backwards to pinpoint the exact person who left that DNA. Which brings us to Section 4, tracing the family tree, a genealogical labyrinth. Here is where the sheer scale of this investigation just blows your mind. 79. Othram's brilliant science produced a solid lead pointing to a sweet, elderly woman in Wichita, Kansas, who turned out to be a distant relative of the killer. But here's the massive catch. That woman had 79 grandchildren. All of a sudden, investigators were staring at dozens of potential male suspects spread all across the country. So how on earth do you narrow that down? Well, detectives actually flew to Kansas and got voluntary DNA from the relative and her son to help refine the genetic tree. Then, the Michigan State Police teamed up with background-checked students from Western Michigan University. These students stepped up as digital detectives, conducting extensive open-source internet searches, combing through obituaries, public records, the whole shebang. They were looking for one specific puzzle piece. Which of these descendants had a geographic connection to Flint, Michigan in 1983? Through a rigorous process of elimination, they finally found their man. Section 5, The Monster Next Door, Unmasking Ronnie Collins. This is probably the most terrifying part of the story. How perfectly this guy blended into normal life. The suspect was Ronnie Collins. He was 75 at the time of discovery, meaning he was in his early 30s back in 1983. His occupation? He was a dental hygienist who actually worked at a Michigan prison. His persona was literally that of a good citizen, a family man with zero significant criminal history who played in a traveling band on the weekends. And the final chilling detail? In 1983, he drove a white van to transport his band equipment. That vague tip from the 80s, it was entirely accurate. He was a monster, just hiding right behind the mask of a totally normal life. From there, things moved incredibly fast. By October 2025, the genealogical puzzle was solved, and Collins was officially identified as the viable suspect. A detective reached out to simply chat with him, playing it cool so as not to spook him, but Collins kept putting the detective off over the holidays. Then, in January 2026, he completely skipped a scheduled interview. Knowing the walls were finally closing in, police secured a search warrant for his DNA in early February. But when they arrived at his home, his current wife told them that Ronnie Collins had committed suicide the very day that interview was supposed to happen. He knew his past had finally caught up to him. Section 6. Finding Justice and Closure. The Ripple Effect of Answers. Now, even though he took his own life, investigators still collected DNA from Ronnie Collins during his autopsy. They ran it through the state lab, and the results were completely definitive. It confirmed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Ronnie Collins was the perpetrator who abducted and murdered Sherry Jo Elliott. There was absolutely no guesswork left. The science provided the undeniable truth. But, when detectives finally told Sherry's mother, Joyce, that the case was solved, her reaction was just heartbreaking. She said, "I still can't hug her, so nothing's changed. It's still the same. But I tell my late husband every day, we got him." It really perfectly captures the bittersweet reality of these cold case resolutions. The technology brings absolute, undeniable answers, but it can't undo the tragic loss or the pain the family endured for decades, especially the pain of Sherry's stepfather, who passed away just months before his name was finally completely cleared. 43. 43 agonizing years of waiting. Imagine looking at strangers in the grocery store for 4 decades, wondering, was it you? This number represents a literal lifetime of grief for this family. And it highlights exactly why investigators stress the immense urgency of using this genetic technology right now, before more surviving family members pass away without ever knowing the truth about what happened to the people they love. And the ripple effects of solving this case are massive. First of all, Collins is now a viable suspect in a 1969 double disappearance of 2 girls in Oscoda, Michigan. Girls who were also last seen getting into a white van near where Collins' band was playing at the time. Secondly, this case proves that modern investigations can be DNA-led immediately, completely bypassing how unreliable human memory can be. Crucially, it brings absolute certainty and prevents innocent people like Sherry's stepdad from facing wrongful accusations. But most importantly, it offers a real beacon of hope to other families who have been waiting decades in the dark. So I want to leave you with this profound question. With forensic genetic genealogy advancing so incredibly rapidly, how many other cold cases are out there, just waiting for a single DNA breakthrough? As this technology gets even better over the next 10 to 20 years, we are going to see an absolute revolution in justice. Criminals who thought they got away with it 40 years ago, they're no longer safe. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep asking questions.